Hello and welcome to the Tracy Sandler Show, brought to you by FIVO. I am your host, Tracy Sandler. So excited to welcome back to the show my good friend, colleague, such an incredible sports mind, such an incredible mind, great beauty, kind person, fun to be around, all of the things. Fox Sports is Carmen Vitali.
Wow. What an intro. My gosh. Can I just have you intro me everywhere? Oh, thank you. No, I'm so happy.
I can record that. Just clip it off.
And then I'll just let me start my reel with that, all of that kind of stuff. Thank you so much, Tracy. I'm so glad to be here. I'm always happy to do your show. So thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And Carmen covers the NFC. I was going to say the AFC North, but you don't cover that. Though very knowledgeable about it, I know. But he covers the NFC North, and the 49ers are welcoming, we'll use that term, the Chicago Bears to Levi Stadium this week. For the 49ers part, and for this little beat writer's part, to not be going into a place where it's very cold and snowing is great. Because the last 2 weeks, Buffalo was an experience. I'm glad I experienced it, but I'm good. So they come to Levi Stadium. These two teams are interesting because obviously the Bears, and we're going to talk about it shortly, have had quite a bit of turmoil. They're fired their coach for the first time since
ever.
1800 during the season. Or ever. So 1800, but ever. During the season, they have an interim head coach. They have this young rookie quarterback. They seem to refuse to get him help, but we'll see. We'll talk more about that. Then the 49ers are a team that no one thought would be 5-7 at this point. No win is an easy win for them. I think in the beginning of the season, you would think, okay, the Bears game, and teams always win a game they shouldn't or lose a game they shouldn't, but you look at that game as a very winnable game. That doesn't really exist, I don't think, for San Francisco anymore. But this is a team whose season is not over, but for all intents and purposes, it's over. They're still in it, but for all intents and purposes, this is probably it. And we can talk more about that. There are a couple things Kyle Shanahan has said over the last couple of days that have made me realize, just kind of will make sense here. But let's start with the Bears. Interim head coach. We talked offline. The way that Matt Eberflus was fired, is this organization going to be able to change? Or is it going to just be same story, different day, year after year?
Yeah, that's the big question mark, because when Ryan Poles was hired in 2022, their general manager, he explicitly said he was brought there to break cycles. And while the Chicago Bears have never fired a coach in the middle of a season in their 104-year history, this is perpetuating the exact cycle that Ryan Poles was supposed to break, in that you have now fired your coach less than a year into the career of a first-round quarterback that you selected. So this happened to Justin Fields before Caleb Williams. It happened to Mitch Trubisky before Justin Fields. That is not something that is indicative necessarily of the general manager, because that supersedes the general manager. It was Ryan Pace and now Ryan Poles that this has now happened under. This is something that is an underlying trend within the organization itself, and it speaks to how dysfunctional they are just as an organization. Now, they've undergone an incredible overhaul, both on the football side of things and on the business side of things. You have a team president that's now in charge of everything in Kevin Warren. But my concern when Kevin Warren was hired and him being placed in the org chart above both business and football is that even if you are qualified to do both of those jobs, that is going to stretch anybody incredibly thin. And the Bears are embarking on, they want to build a new stadium. That's going to be billions of dollars that's coming up on the horizon. Nothing is solved, though, when it comes to where the stadium's going to be. There's still a very tumultuous kind of situation happening on that regard. Nothing's resolved yet as far as the stadium goes. So that's the business side of things. And now you have a completely upended football staff that you're going to now have to embark on this head coaching search. And the biggest thing to me was not only, yes, the press conference where Matt Eberflus went and said that he was confident he'd be coaching the Bears against the 49ers, only to be fired 2 hours later. I am on record multiple times this week already. Just go check out my social media as to why that's an issue. And it's not a big deal. It is a big deal. And there's reasons why. But the press conference that happened Monday morning is another red flag in that this organization has not changed, because you had Kevin Warren and you had Ryan Poles sitting up there. Kevin Warren's opening statement was 8.5 minutes long.
Okay.
That is, yes, it was a 20-something minute press conference overall. 8.5 minutes were taken up at the very beginning of Kevin Warren talking. And then you hear it'll be a collaborative effort and that Ryan Poles will be the one to hire the new head coach. But all of your actions and all of the kind of way that this all transpired leads us to believe that it is not Ryan Poles' call, that Kevin Warren, in fact, is doing a lot of the string pulling behind the scenes. And then, by the way, you've got the layer of ownership who likes to say that they stay out of it, but they have a weekly meeting with Kevin Warren, with the general manager, and with the head coach. That is something that happens in Callis Hall every single week. That is not something that necessarily happens with owners that take a little bit more of a back seat to their team. But the McCaskies, formerly the Hallises, they are the founding family of the National Football League. Of course they're involved. You can't tell me otherwise. So now if you're a coaching candidate and you're talking big picture here, you look at that and say, okay, well, I'm reporting to the general manager. Well, he then reports to the team president. And then the team president then goes up to ownership. There are so many now levels of red tape that you have to clear in order to get anything done, which is why this is such a huge issue and why you see that this has now become a pattern for the Chicago Bears. No matter who is coaching, no matter who is the general manager, there is an underlying just baseline of dysfunction organizationally that doesn't look like it's been solved or rectified.
Well, and I think for 49ers fans listening to this, I really want you to take a moment and really listen to it, because there's been a lot of flack, I guess, a lot of criticism of Kyle Shanahan and this, that, and that, and the other. And the reality is, like, you actually have a very stable organization. And the thing with this Bears organization, this could have been the 49ers 10 years ago.
Yeah.
You had this issue with Jed York and Trent Baalke and Jim Harbaugh. It came to a head. They fired Jim Harbaugh. They hire Jim Tomsula. It's a disaster. They hired Chip Kelly. It's a disaster. They bring in Kyle and Shanahan, John Lynch, and there's a rebuild, and we've seen what the success can do, but bad seasons happen. You don't fire a Kyle Shanahan because you've had a bad season, especially a season where, half the roster, if not more, has been injured. I think last year's Pro Bowlers have thus far missed a total of 33 games, if that makes sense. Like, if you add up all the games each of them has missed, it's 33 games. That is a tremendous stat. Like, that is just insane. And they had 10 Pro Bowlers last year. So it's crazy. So when you listen to what's going on with the Bears, the stability that's in the 49ers organization now, and the fact that you just don't go and fire Kyle Shanahan because he lost in the Super Bowl. He got to the Super Bowl. Only 2 teams get to go. One of them gets to win. It's really hard to get there. And I think this year is such a good example of that, because going into the year, the 49ers were Super Bowl favorites, and everybody thought, they were going to be right back in it, competing with the Lions, maybe competing with the Eagles. Now, of course, it's like the Lions and the Eagles. But you see what can happen. You have a training camp filled with drama over a contract and a number of personal tragedies off the field have happened, which take their toll. These people are human, and these are terrible, terrible things that have happened, and they take their toll. They've had injury after injury after injury. Last year, they were really lucky with the injuries. So it's just this idea that, he just can't get back to the Super Bowl is so silly. That's my Twitter voice. It's so silly. But I want 49ers fans to listen, because you don't want to create dysfunction. And if they fired Kyle Shanahan, who are they getting that's better than Kyle Shanahan? Yeah. That's what I'd like to know. Who are they bringing? They're not going to fire Kyle Shanahan. That's I would say, I would be so incredibly shocked that it would be beyond. So they're not going to fire Kyle Shanahan this year. That's just not going to happen. But I think
there's also the perspective of, okay, if Kyle Shanahan was fired, there are Chicago fans. There are fans all over the league that are rooting for that to happen because they want Kyle Shanahan. So shouldn't that be a little bit of a perspective thing for 49ers? He
would have a new job in an hour. I kid you not. He would have 5 interviews, and by the next morning, he would have a new job. He may not even need to interview. Literally, he would totally just have a new job. So I think it's something to think about. And, from the 49ers perspective, as I look at the last 5 games of the season, it's kind of, I've been thinking a lot about this last week or so. Like, what would make the last 5 games a success? Save them going to the playoffs, which if you've been watching the 49ers, the idea of them making some sort of run where they win their next 5 games, Bears, maybe, Rams will be tough. They've already lost them. Travel to Miami, home against the Lions, who might drop 60 points on them. And then they go to Arizona. Like, not all these teams sound, some of them do, some of them don't, so scary, but that's the idea of that team that we watched on Sunday Night Football going on a run. This is the team that doesn't have Christian McCaffrey the rest of the season, doesn't have Jordan Mason the rest of the season. Rookie Isaac Guerrero has been tremendous, but now he is their number 1 running back. They had to sign running backs this week. Nick Bosa and Trent Williams have not practiced in days. This will come out on Friday, and as of Wednesday, Nick Bosa and Trent Williams did not practice. They didn't make the trip, which makes sense. Bosa didn't make the trip to Green Bay either because he was, there was no reason to do that. Like, there's a chance Bosa and Williams, do we see them play again? Kyle Shanahan was asked Wednesday, do you know with certainty that Nick Bosa will play again this season? And in true Kyle Shanahan fashion, he said, I'm not God, but there is a chance he'll play this week. So like that. So it was a perfect Kyle Shanahanism. So assuming they're not able to make that run. Okay, let's assume that doesn't happen, or that the Seahawks don't completely fall apart, or because they have to win the division. They're not going to get a wild card spot. I've been thinking about what is the success of these next 5 games. And to me, success in these next 5 games is not even wins and losses. It's kind of the young guys showing fight. They're rookies kind of stepping up, showing some fight. Brock Purdy playing well, and them kind of figuring out who's staying and who's going. The roster is going to need to be retooled for sure. It's not a rebuild, but it is going to be a retooling. They're very top heavy in that roster. Not everyone's going to be able to say. So I think that is kind of an success. And do we see them fight in games? Even if they lose them, do we see them fight these next 5 games? That's kind of a thought. And I guess, it starts on Sunday.
It does. Yeah. Like when you're talking big picture, I was always very, I tried to temper expectations and be very realistic about what to expect out of the Chicago Bears in general. And for the expectations that I had, or the things I wanted to see to make this season a success for the Chicago Bears, all of that is still on the table for them at this point.
Okay, what are those things?
Those things are, is your rookie quarterback developing? Do you know for sure that he is the future of your franchise? Do you have the infrastructure roster-wise to facilitate that development? Can you continue to have a dominant defense, given all of the talent that you have on that side of the ball, where it's working symbiotically with the offense then? And does this plan look like it's working? Now, the plan got blown up because Matt Eberflus has now been fired. But Ryan Poles, who is the architect of this roster and this whole rebuild, which has taken up until this point 3 years to set Caleb Williams up in a good situation for a rookie quarterback. Outside of coaching, he has all the talent around him. You're left wanting a little bit on the offensive line, but you have seen Caleb Williams fight to week in and week out. And no matter how improbable it looks, you go back to the Washington game, which I think is where all of this kind of fell apart. And it wasn't even the Hail Mary. It was the play before the Hail Mary that really did this organization in. It did Matt Eberflus in. It kind of doomed him. But the Bears didn't lead. It was a hot mess. The Bears did not lead at all during that game until the final 25 seconds of the game, where Caleb Williams, after playing terribly for the first 3 quarters, willed the team back and got them their first lead with 25 seconds left, so that it was going to take a miracle for the Commanders to pull that out. The Commanders got that miracle due to a lot of breakdown, coaching in otherwise, but it wasn't Caleb Williams. And then you look at that game against the Green Bay Packers, coming off the bye week. Coming off their bye week. You had a game-winning drive at the end of that game. You got into the range of Cairo Santos, your field goal kicker, and it gets blocked. But that's not on Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams fought with a team that could very well make a postseason run and end up in the Super Bowl, fought tooth and nail with the big bad Green Bay Packers and had that team in a position to win that game. It just didn't work out. And then you look at the Minnesota Vikings. Late in the game, they forced overtime. And then, yes, Caleb Williams has another rookie moment and it comes at an inopportune time. There's some coaching malpractice again, yada, yada, yada. Then the Detroit Lions. You are the only quarterback to score multiple touchdowns or pass for multiple touchdowns on the Detroit Lions defense.
Mm-hmm.
And you at one point are in a position to continue that game. And it goes spectacularly to pieces, as we know.
Right.
But that wasn't on Caleb Williams. He took the sack. That was a rookie mistake, all of that kind of stuff. But in that moment, there was an opportunity for Matt Eberflus to take the timeout where, yes, you didn't want to do that before until the field goal and all that other stuff. But you fought back and you went toe-to-toe with the Detroit Lions. All of that said, that makes me think that Caleb Williams just has an incredible amount of mental fortitude. He has this unshakable belief in himself, and he can continue that under Thomas Brown, who he has been way more productive under. It's a small sample size, but they still have so much to play for in this game against the 49ers to bring this all back to this week. They have so much to play for, and there is that interim head coach bump that's not quantifiable, but these guys really respond to Thomas Brown. They have over the last 3 weeks offensively. Now you get the defense a chance to do so with him as the head coach. He's very direct. He knows how to talk to these players. He was a hard-nosed, college running back and has been around the block. He was in the division with the 49ers when he was with the Rams under Sean McVay. This is a guy that the players really want to play for. So this week, Thomas Brown's first game as a head coach for the Chicago Bears, they're going to want to make him look good. And they are healthy. So they have everything to play for, despite the fact that it's not necessarily the playoffs. Again, I know they're not quite eliminated yet, but that's not what success is for the Chicago Bears this year.
Right.
Success is Caleb Williams the dude? Are you setting him up well? Do you have enough on this roster? What else do you need?
Excuse me.
That is all. Bless you. That is all on the table.
By the way, everything you're saying is true. If I sneeze, that means everything you're saying is true.
Okay.
It's like an old wives' tale.
That's so funny. So they have a lot to play for, despite the fact it's not playoff aspirations. So I think a lot of this game is going to come down to who is a little bit more motivated. And in that regard, I kind of have to give the edge to the Chicago Bears.
Yeah. Oh, I think that that's probably true. I think the only thing I will say for the San Francisco 49ers team in terms of motivation, you still have George Kittle, Fred Warner. Isaac Guerrero wants to show that he can be, the guy they need him to be. Brock Purdy probably feels like, I think the criticism of Brock Purdy is not necessarily totally fair. It's not, I think it's not, it's, I don't know. I just don't think it's totally fair. I had a lot of trouble getting that out. I'm going to talk a lot about it with my next guest, Matt Sims. We're going to kind of break that down a little bit, but I think he would like to have a really good game. It would be nice to see Ricky Pearsall a little more involved. But they're motivated in that they don't want to be embarrassed these last 5 games. And I think they feel like they haven't said it, but they've been kind of embarrassed, especially Sunday night, because you're on Sunday Night Football. That the Packers game was like America's game of the week, but Sunday night, you're on Sunday Night Football. And I was thinking about this, that amazing, incredible Josh Allen play. And I'm like, of course it happens against this 49ers team. That's in itself like a little that play will go down in history. It's going to be shown forever and ever like that. And it will always be against the 49ers.
That's how I felt about the Hail Mary that Jaden Daniels threw against the Chicago Bears.
Yep.
And I'm like, that's going to be shown every single time, Jaden Daniels is on a game-winning drive or needs whatever. Like, that is what everybody is now going to show, and the Bears are on the bad side of that. So in the same vein, the 49ers are on the other side of the throw and catch.
It was an incredible play. But I think that they do have some pride to play for, and I think they were on the road for a couple tough games. They're back home. Then they have the Rams 4 days later. They've already lost the Rams this year. So I think for them, there is a level of motivation, and they're not, it's funny. They're not in it. I mean, I think they're not in it because as I said earlier, I haven't seen anything from this team in the last several weeks that makes me think they have the ability to go on a run. And Kyle Shanahan said something interesting. I know I mentioned earlier. Oh, I previewed this earlier. Now I'm going to say there's two things that I'll bring up. One, I have talked a lot about on social media and I've posted it, but for those of you who may have missed it, on Sunday he was asked, does this team maybe not have as much fight? Because they've been through it. There have been, in the last 3 years, teams that were 3-4, 3-5, went on these runs. Last year's team was 5-0. They lost 3, then, went on these runs. But, and he said, I wouldn't say they don't have fight. I'm not going to say this team doesn't have fight. You guys can see the full clip on my Instagram. But this team is not as good as those teams. And he doesn't mean that from a roster perspective, but that is probably part of it. But, I think what he said, they haven't really found their way and they're still finding their way. And I think part of these next 5 games is they're finding their way and actually maybe answering some questions on what they need to get there for next season. So I think that's one kind of interesting comment. The other one I would say is on our Monday conference call and today, when asked about Christian McCaffrey, and it's a 6-week injury. So, he'll come back stronger next year. And he said it twice. He said it on Monday and he said it today. And then somebody said, well, if you made the playoffs, would he be able to come back? And he said, well, it's a 6-week injury. So yes, if we made the playoffs, he'd be able to come. But it just feels like
he's already resigned himself to the fact that I don't
want to say resigned because I feel like people are like, this is what he's, because I don't think it's a resigned. I think it's a realisticness of where they are. And I think I go back to what he said is that this team is not as good and we haven't found our way. That was the difference between was like maybe those rosters were a little better, but the 3-4 team, the 3-5 team, they didn't feel lost. I think they did not feel lost. This team feels somewhat lost. And I do not think it is a Kyle Shanahan problem. I think there are coaching issues. I don't think they're on him, but I do think there are some coaching issues. It'll see kind of what happens with the defensive coordinator, with the special teams coordinator in the offseason. But this team feels a little bit lost. And I think what that shows is that this last year was the year. For this group of guys, last year was the year. And I always felt that last year's Super Bowl was going to take a really big emotional toll on this team. I thought it was going to be problematic. And as I look at the season and I look at every week, they've never actually looked like a good football team, even week 1 against the Jets. And the Jets are bad. So like they were, and it was, they're home. It's Monday Night Football. They had just been in the Super Bowl and they pulled out the win, but like the Jets were not good in that game. They did not play well. And I think the only game where they sort of looked like a good football team was against the Cowboys. But that's
how bad the Cowboys are.
That's how bad the Cowboys, exactly. And that's why I don't feel like they have it. It's not that I don't think they have the fight in them. I'm with Kyle. It's not that I don't think they have the fight in them. I just think that this group they're just not built for that kind of run, especially if they're going to have to try to make it, obviously without Christian McCaffrey. We'll see with Nick Bosa. We'll see with Trent Williams. Like there's, that's a lot of things. But we have an opportunity and here's a name that maybe the casual fan doesn't know, but we have an opportunity to see Ben Bartch on the offensive line, who played really well the other night. How does he solidify himself into a future position? We have a chance to see maybe Renardo Green probably get more snaps in the slot with Deommodore Lenoir coming back. You'll have Ward on Lenoir on the outside. Can you put Renardo Green in the slot and see, like, is he really that guy? Do you give him some snaps on the outside to see, like, is he one of your corners of the future? Because after signing Lenoir, they're probably not going to be able to sign Charvarius Ward. He's a free agent this season. So financially, it's going to be difficult. So I think that's the opportunity. Can Ricky Pearsall show that, okay, at the wide receiver position, you may need this, but you've got Ricky Pearsall and you're going to get Brandon Ayuk back. And Brandon Ayuk, by the way, because he got injured so long ago, kind of forget. That's a big one not to have as well. So, they need to figure out tight end. They have a lot of things to do, but I think in terms of pride and kind of some fight and to show for some of these guys to show, no, I should be here next year. I should keep my position, or I should take a position. Like I should still be here next year. I should be a big part of the plan. And obviously the rookies will be, but some of these other guys can, prove that no, they really need to be there. So that's kind of what I'm thinking for Sunday. I don't know that this game, and we talked a little about this offline, like the X's and O's and the matchups of this game. I don't think this game really has that. There will be matches, there will be X's and O's, but I think the bigger conversation for both of these teams is the bigger conversation. Like what do these next few games mean for the future of these teams? So I feel like we've done a very nice job getting that out.
Yeah. I just think a lot of this is
tap the shoulder.
it's a lot of stuff that's like a very unquantifiable, because that's what's really going to determine the outcome of these games more than any specific matchup or honing in on anything about, is it this, the Bears offensive line versus the Niners defensive line without Nick Bosa and all this other stuff. It's more about which team is more motivated, which team has more to play for, which team has more to prove, and how that shows up week in and week out as the rest of the season goes on, when it is largely a lost season when it comes to playoff aspirations for either of these teams. Because even if the Niners do make it, we wonder about the viability that they really have as a playoff team once they even get in there, because the NFC, like the AFC, is pretty much all locked up at this point. The NFC is still, there is no margin for error. For as good as the Lions and the Eagles have looked, if the Lions lose this game on Thursday night against the Packers, the number one seed is completely up for grabs. And there's not for as dominant as the Lions have been at times this season, they do not have a margin for error because of the field in the NFC being that much more competitive in a lot of ways, and just kind of a little bit, I don't know if you could say better than the AFC, but it's just, there's more of a toss-up. And when you get to the playoffs, that's really going to separate some of these elite teams. And do the 49ers have a roster? Do they have the health to even compete when it's a do or die scenario, when, the new season starts of the playoffs? And that is where you have to be a little bit more realistic too. And it's refreshing, honestly, to see Kyle Shanahan, and I think, be
well, and I don't
that.
Think he's, I don't think he's resigned, and it may have, but I think he just, the reality is Christian is coming back next year. And I think the other reality of that too is, like you said, even if they did make the playoffs, Christian's not going to be ready for a week one matchup. They're not going to have a bye, and they're going to have to fly to Detroit or Philadelphia or Minneapolis or maybe Green Bay. It's going to be that kind of situation. So it's not that I think, I don't think he's resigned. I just feel like he understands his team. For him to say the other night, this is not as good a team, I can't compare teams, is a very refreshing thing. And he was actually asked about that today, that a lot of coaches are not like that, aren't open. And I don't think Kyle was saying was like next year, because I think we all know we're not going to the playoffs, but he's just saying like Christian's at him, and he wouldn't be ready. And would it even be smart to do that to him? Right. If you're going to go, if they ended up having to go to Detroit or Philly or Minneapolis or Green Bay for the first playoff game, is it even smart to Christian now coming off 2 injuries? No, it's probably not. So, we'll see what happens. But I think Sunday's game, is going to be interesting in terms of, all the things that we talked about. And I also just have to say that I kind of feel like the Bears are going to come in with their interim head coach. They're going to win. 49ers fans are going to lose their minds. And then I may just log off social media till the end of time.
Yeah. As someone who has to do that quite a bit, I get it. And listen, the Bears have scraped rock bottom, and now it's only up from here for them, basically. I don't know. And there's, the whole coaching search and everything like that. We'll see how that materializes, but this is an extended job interview too for Thomas Brown to see if he can handle both calling the offensive plays and managing the game and everything else that comes with being a head coach. He's had head coaching interest before. This is something that now he has a real shot at. It's still not totally a fair shake, which is it sucks to see, because I do think that Thomas Brown is a really good coach and could absolutely go about proper channels and find his way into a head coaching position outside of this. But it is going to be very interesting down the stretch. He's going to be he's coaching for a job. He's coaching for a job. The players are reinvigorated. There is the unquantifiable interim head coach bump. So this is going to be very interesting in San Francisco, or in Santa Clara.
It sure will. Carmen, thank you so much for joining me today. Please let everyone know where they can find you.
Yeah, go to Carmi V on Twitter, Instagram, or Blue Sky now. I've been posting a lot more on Blue Sky. I find it to be a more coexisting and collaborative and wonderful environment. But I do Fox Sports Saturday is on the radio, in which Tracy will be joining me for this week.
Catch us this week. If you like this, you get this for 2 hours on Saturday.
I know. Come join us from 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern, 1 to 3 p.m. Pacific on Fox Sports Radio for Fox Football Saturday with Tracy and I this Saturday.
Yep, it'll be a lot of fun. Well, Carmen, I'm excited to see you Saturday. Yeah. Thank you for joining, and I will talk to you soon. And you guys stay tuned because we got Matt Sims from the Sims Complete Pod coming on, and we're going to talk quite a bit of Brock Purdy. And I know everybody has opinions there. All right, bye, Carmen. All right, all. We just heard from Carmen Vitali from Fox Sports and talked a lot about the Bears and the 49ers and kind of where these 2 seasons are going for them and what a successful season would be for each, knowing that each is not going to be hoisting the Lombardi at the end of this one. But now I have the great and powerful, I saw Wicked, so now I'm like all Wizard of Ozzy, great and powerful Matt Sims of the Sims Complete Podcast, quarterback analysis or extraordinaire. That's not a real word, but I'm going to go with it because I like it.
Right.
Welcome back to the show, Matt. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing, Tracy? Thank you for having me. And that was very kind words. I don't know if I'm deserving of any of those.
I like it. The great and powerful. Yeah. Great and powerful Matt Sims. Well, Matt, I wanted to talk about, and we talked a little offline about Brock Purdy, because we talked in my last segment a little bit less about a game preview for the Bears and the 49ers, a little bit more about, like I said, a kind of a big picture of where these teams are going. And San Francisco in a somewhat better spot than the Bears, 5 games left. They could run the table. They could make it to the playoffs. I don't think we've seen anything from this team that makes me think that will actually happen. They've now lost McCaffrey. Nick Bosa and Trent Williams didn't practice on Wednesday. I mean, I think the writing is on the wall as to where the season ends for them. But the big offseason conversation is going to be that about quarterback Brock Purdy. And going into the season, him coming off, going to an NFC championship game, he got hurt, then going to a Super Bowl, that he was going to have probably another tremendous season and sign a very lucrative long-term contract with San Francisco. I think that probably is still going to happen. But this season has been a little bit different. It's been a little bit up and down. It's been a lot of down for the team. Brock has had weeks where he has really looked good, and he's had weeks where he has not looked as good. He's had weeks where he's looked bad. I kind of take the Buffalo game out of it because I think it's an unfair game to judge anyone on. They were pretty much all terrible. Save Christian, who looked like he was going to have a breakout game. They were all terrible. The weather was a factor. The Bills are very good. There were so many things going on. So kind of taking that out of it. But I would kind of just love your opinion on Brock this season. From what you've seen, has there been a regression? And do you think there is any concern, in your opinion, from the organization standpoint, as to do they want to commit to him as their long-term guy?
All right. So where to start with this? I feel like there's multiple angles we could take, but let's just kind of go back in history a little bit. This season essentially is very consistent to what we've seen with the San Francisco 49ers and their team. The last time that they went to a Super Bowl, they had a complete regression as a team the following year, and had basically like a 500 record. I don't know exactly, but this team, following a Super Bowl run, I think in their total record now is like 11-17 or something like that. So it's not successful. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that this team really has emptied the tank with trying to obviously win the game, make a run, NFC Championship game, then the Super Bowl, right? Coming up short, all these things. And really just the fatigue of it, I think, caught up to everybody. I think the fatigue caught up it to Brock Purdy, to Trent Williams, to Christian McCaffrey, to even Kyle Shanahan in a way. And
I'm going to interject one thing really quickly, and it's not even just last year's Super Bowl run. It's the last 3 years of going to 3 NFC Championship games and a Super Bowl and not winning. And that definitely takes its toll. So yes, last year for sure, but I think it's the accumulation, and each loss has been like, save the NFC Championship game for the 2021 season where they lost to the Rams, that everyone feels that Jaquasi Tartt catches the interception, they go to the Super Bowl. But they went that season, they were 3-4, and they had to go on a run, and then they had to travel all through the playoffs. And then the next year they lose 2 quarterbacks. Brock Purdy's the guy, and then he gets hurt in the NFC Championship. Like, each of these losses has been emotional and physically taxing. So I think, yes, it's that Super Bowl and everything that's run up to it. Sorry, please go ahead.
No, I mean, it's a great point, and I think it's something that we can't, underestimate the power and the effect those things have on football team. And we got to remember that they are human beings, and that, we all at times get tired and fatigued at our job, at our workplace, and, have to find ways to tighten up our schedules and, make sure that we're managing our stress and our energy and what needs to be focused on. And I think that's, to reiterate, like, I think everything just kind of caught up to this football team. I don't see a team that is as creative offensively as it once was in the past. Everyone thought that Christian McCaffrey into the lineup, he's just going to solve every problem in the world for this football team.
Not everyone thought that.
Well, yeah, I hear you're right. Listen, some people actually know what they're talking about, and you're one of them. And, with Christian McCaffrey in the lineup, the team's 1-3. And, some would argue that with Jordan Mason, the running game was as effective in the same regard, whether it was Christian McCaffrey or Jordan Mason. The one thing that I think we were all expecting was the offense to be, I guess, a little bit more balanced with Christian McCaffrey out of the backfield, right? We saw some highlights of that in the Tampa Bay game, right, where they connected on some big plays late there, where we're like, okay, this is what we thought would be the difference when Christian comes back. The truth is, something that we had discussed on this show last year, I think for Christian, all of his reps are catching up to him. The thousands of reps and essentially the team being the offense, especially being run through Christian's success on the ground and through the air, I think really did catch up to him. And that's why this year for him, he has just been hobbling along and trying to survive. And I think we all thought that this guy was just, he had a Teflon vest on, right? That he could just survive all of these things. But the truth is that the running back position is extremely violent. It's extremely difficult. Him and Alvin Kamara are doing things statistically better than anybody in the league as far as the fact that they can run and catch out of the backfield. But Alvin had his injury bug not too long ago. Now Christian's kind of having his. So big picture, to go back to what you were originally discussing. We're seeing Brock Purdy perform, right, below the standard in which we were used to when his surrounding cast isn't as healthy or is as sharp as they've been. And this is the debate that I've made with New York Giants fans all the time, about Daniel Jones. Well, Daniel Jones stinks. Okay, well, what else about our team is good?
Right.
We're not healthy. Our offensive line is awful. We struggle to get open and man coverage. But yet we still expect Daniel Jones to just overcome all of these things that we know about football in this great team game and say, hey, make it work. So it really just depends on where we're coming from the argument. The truth is, it's the greatest team game, right, in all of sports. And when your team is injured and depleted and struggling, right, to find rhythm, and your coaching staff has also been depleted throughout the years, it's very difficult, I think, for sustained success. And even, as we look at the Kansas City Chiefs, like the fans are saying, well, look at Kansas City. Well, Kansas City isn't the same team either. If you had to make me bet right now, are they going to three-peat or not? I'm going to say, no, they are not. They are probably going to get caught and trip up against some of these other teams in the NFL, and certainly against one of the NFC teams if they make it to the Super Bowl, because I think those are where the best two teams in the NFL alive right now, and the Detroit Lions and the Philadelphia Eagles.
I agree. And I think in Kansas City does have Patrick Mahomes, and he can make up for a lot of things, but Patrick Mahomes is like a one of one. Yeah. So to compare, and it's taking nothing away from Brock, because
he's playing awful. Let's be truthful.
And he's not even playing great.
He's playing awful. What he has done compared to Brock is that in all the close games that have been one scores, he has made the 2 or 3 plays, whether it's scrambling or throwing, to get his team in position. Right. And then, of course, the other one against the Denver Broncos, where they're blocking a late game field goal that in, all regards is essentially a chip shot in today's NFL.
Right. So I think, everybody kind of has to keep that in mind. And I understand that fans get frustrated, and, I understand there's the twofold side of like, wow, my team goes to the NFC Championship game every year and has gone to 2 Super Bowls. They haven't won, but there are 30 other teams that would like to be in that position.
Yeah.
And then there's the fans that are like, but we keep going and we don't win. And so what's the point? I think, it's really hard. And I think this season and the 2020 season should be such examples of how hard it is to get to a Super Bowl. Because the other thing the 49ers have had, and I know other teams have them, and I cover this team, so I see it every day, but this team, the amount of injuries on this team, and their 10 Pro Bowlers last year have missed a combined 33 games this year.
Yeah,
that says not good. That says a lot. And last year they were really lucky on the injury bug. The year before they were relatively lucky. Yes, they kept losing quarterbacks, but they seemed to just keep having one to step in and take over. Mm-hmm. But they were really lucky on the injury bug. And this year they're really not. They've also dealt with some things that have happened off field that are tragic.
Absolutely.
And devastating. Yeah. And so that takes its toll as well. So I just feel like everybody's got to calm down. I mean, it annoys me, and I know that it shouldn't, but everybody's got to relax. Kyle Shanahan's not getting fired. Kyle Shanahan should not get fired. That is like the most asinine conversation I've ever heard, and I'm sure people get mad at me for saying that. But I'd like to know who you think they're gonna bring in.
How are you going to upgrade at that position? Name 100%. One other person. Yeah, you could say Ben Johnson, but Kyle Shanahan is proven, and he's done it. Yeah. And he's been one of the greatest assistants, right, in all of football that has helped teams like, the Houston Texans go to the playoffs and go to AFC Championship games. He's helped the Washington Commanders, go to the playoffs when they, so it's like he's one of the best in the business. And if anything, he has earned the right to where he has the ability to walk away from you, not you firing him, right? And that's the truth of it, whether you like it or not, 49ers fans. And it's the other thing, I guess, is, the inability, right? And this kind of falls more, I guess, on Kyle and John Lynch, right? The offseason things, right? Mm-hmm. The holdouts of Trent Williams, the Brandon Ayuk holdout, obviously Ricky Pearsall being shot is just who would have imagined anything like that happening to anyone on a football team going into the season? And, those, we discussed it a few weeks ago, I feel like, with just when you're talking more about the team outside of the lines, how can you expect to be a really good team within the lines? And, for all the great teams out there right now, very few of those conversations are being discussed outside of football, right? And, I think that's where the 49ers management really failed this offseason.
Yes,
taking care of Trent Williams, taking care of Brandon Ayuk, getting all those things taken care of. And really it was more so of, if you really didn't feel that confident about Brandon and what you were paying him, you should have walked from the situation and just said, congratulations, Brandon. We hope the next team pays you what you want, and we'll just continue to do what we do. The Deebo Samuel thing, he's another example too. Deebo doesn't look the same. Deebo looks like he's by far a step slower offensively. George Kittle, he doesn't look as sharp and as springy and as fiery as he once would. So, when we're saying that about the guys in the football team that are usually the highest of energies in all of football, when they look like they are spent, I think that is a sign too that just, this is clearly not your year. Now, hey, can you make it a run here late? For sure, but you still got to have a lot of things that kind of go your way to really make it a long-lasting run.
Well, I mentioned this in the last segment, and I think it's worth kind of bringing up again because I'd love your thoughts on it. After the game on Sunday night, Kyle was asked, do you feel like this team doesn't have as much fight as some of these other teams? The team that went 3-4 and 3-5, and they made the run. And he said, I wouldn't say they don't have as much fight. I definitely would not say that. They're not as good at teams. And we haven't found our way yet. And we've been trying to find our way. And I do think part of that goes back to what you were saying. The vibes were off all through training camp because of the Brandon Ayuk step. And Brandon Ayuk, to his credit, admitted he made it harder than it had it to be. I think part of it is on management, and I do think there came a point at the end there where Brandon Ayuk took the same contract that was available to him August 12th, 13th, 14th. It could have changed, that for him changed lots of things. And then we talk about all these injuries and then kind of forget that Brandon Ayuk has a torn ACL and is out for the season. I mean, on top of everything else. Yeah. So, there's that. So those have been off. But I think this team, as a result, really hasn't found its way. And it had to let go of Eric Armstead, and that on the aggregate, it felt like they got better, but they did not get better on the line. That was a big person. They've been without Dre Greenlaw. That is a huge thing. Hufanga has been in and out of the lineup. And there's a lot of things aside from the offense, a lot of things they've been dealing with, on the defensive side of the ball as well. But I thought it was an interesting comment from Kyle, and he talked about it a little bit again in his Monday call, but it was the same idea that they're not the same teams. And he said it's not necessarily a roster issue. We're just not as good a football team. It is partly a roster issue, and part of it is what we've talked about. And then there was something he said on Monday when he said Christian was going to be out. It's a 6-week injury, but he will get through it and he'll come back stronger next year. Mm-hmm. Which to me was like, okay, so Kyle does realize they're not making the playoffs. And Wednesday he was kind of asked, he said the same thing. And then someone said, well, if you made the playoffs, would he be back? And he said, well, it's 6 weeks. So yes, if we made the playoffs. But it was, and I don't mean like in a resigned way. It's not like a knock at all on Kyle, but I think there has to be some level of realisticness. And I think they have to think about the future here. Like, do you, at this point, if Bosa and Trent Williams are really that hurt, which I'm assuming they are, Bosa's not played in 2 games. He didn't practice on Wednesday. Is it worth putting them out there now for these last 5 games? Do you want to risk Nick Bosa's career for these last 5 games? I think there's things like that they have to start thinking about. And I think that's a part of things that, fans don't like. It doesn't mean they're tanking, but they do have to be smart because there's going to be a lot of retooling in this offseason. There are going to be guys that aren't coming back. They're going to have to make changes. But for your core guys, do you risk that? I don't think you do.
Yeah, I don't think you do either. And I think also we're in a stage of the NFL now too, where even the players themselves, I don't even think will take the unnecessary risk unless they feel like they are needed or want to, right, pursue that, right, and for just the sake of competition, right? So if their heart isn't all in, right, on, well, let me just finish out the season, right, for the sense of our franchise and the pride that we have here to play hard and all that, like, then you can't step out there, and that's where it'll be a discussion, I'm sure, internally, what to do with that situation. But you're right, though. The truth is that your defense isn't as good as it has been in the past. Statistically, yes, it's up there in the ranks of statistically, it's a good defense, but it's nowhere near the same intimidating factor that it once was.
Where and they can't defend the run. They just can't.
Right. So,
and no ability to defend the run.
And that's the thing, right? That was something that no team ran it. Every team had trouble then passing on it because of the speed at linebacker and the ability to cover and be physical at the line of scrimmage and all that, and essentially affect the passer on every single passing down. And, it's just the roster needs to be fixed up a little bit, right? From the defensive line, can you find guys that can eventually replace the great linebacking core that you have, right? Or at least add depth to it so that you trust and understand that they are the same type of football players. We see this a lot, right, in the quarterback position where Miami's an example, right? Miami is built around Tua Tagovailoa, and the whole offense is built around him. Well, no other quarterback on their roster can run the offense like him. So, to be so one-dimensional, well, that's why when Tua's out, they stink. And the same thing for the 49ers is that, you have to start to rebuild the depth of the interior front seven for the defensive part to where even when there are injuries, you do have that next line that is ready to go and really is the future of your franchise, right? I think the Rams are a great example within the division of that way. The young guys that they have on the defensive line are extremely impressive and good players, and they're going to be around for a long time, and they're going to be program guys for them. For the 49ers, who are those guys, right? I don't know if they have them right now at the current moment. Hufanga's one of them, right? But he's on the back end, right? Mustafa's been doing some good things.
He's a free agent, and I don't know that they're going to bring Hufanga back.
Exactly. So it's what happens with him? But I think he's a really good football player. I think he's a 49er with the way they want to play, right? But will they pay him, right? And that's where you get into, obviously the debates too of what do you pay Brock in that situation after that?
Right. And I think that's going to be a big debate this offseason. And, I think we know that no matter what they do.
And your quarterback position, right? I mean, both of them are going to be up at the end of the year for the contracts. And who would you say at the moment is probably staying or going? I don't know.
Yeah, and I don't know because you had Brandon Allen make the start. in Green Bay. And I think part of the feeling around that was that he's as close to Brock in terms of being able to run the offense.
Right.
And then in Buffalo, Josh Dobbs was the backup, and we never saw him come in. I would think, I don't know this for sure, conjecture is that the idea behind that is that in a snow game like that, if something did happen to Brock, you were going to have to start running a lot. And would it be better to have a quarterback who was adept at that? I don't know.
Right.
Brock played the whole game, so it was a moot point, but that is a very, very good question as well. They have a lot of questions on that team. They need the tight end position after George Kittle drops dramatically, and George Kittle isn't going to play forever. So they need a tight end too, who also can take over for George Kittle. They're going to have to figure out what goes on with Trent Williams. I mean, yes, they restructured his contract or they gave him an extension. He held out, but he's been hurt much of the season. He's not a young man in football years. In life years, yes. But in football years, he's not. What is going to happen there? I mean, there's a lot of things they have to figure out there. I think they actually are good to go on the running back position, but who would think that Jordan Mason would also be going on IR and is now out for the season? And I think you do have a good person, Isaac Guerrero, I think, at wide receiver. They're figuring things out. I mean, does Debo stay? I mean, they've made it with his contract very difficult to trade him, but is it time to let go of Debo Samuel? I mean, there's a lot of decisions they're going to have to make this offseason. This team is going to look very, very different. But yes, a lot of it will be, what are they going to pay Brock? And then what can they do? But to think that they're going to be able to get through this offseason without paying Brock, I don't think that's possible. That's not how the league is right now.
Right.
And, I think to ask him to play on the next year, he probably would do it. But, you don't want, not that I think that this would happen, but you really don't want a situation where you're going to training camp with Brock Purdy holding out and asking to be traded. I don't think that would happen, but I don't know. I mean, at this point, who knows? But I think they're going to pay Brock. They're going to give him a contract. Jed York said it last offseason at the owners' meetings. We are going to pay him the market price. And I think with everything that's gone on this season, and I think the other side of that is if you're keeping Shanahan, which they definitely are, you're keeping Brock. And if you're keeping Brock, you're keeping Shanahan. So they're going to keep him. They're going to keep him long term. That's his quarterback of the future. And that's his franchise quarterback, and they're gonna figure it out. And whatever they do, people will be upset, but they'll get over it, and then they'll play football again next year.
Yeah, that's right. And I think big picture wise, right, Brock Purdy, I mean, hey, he's your franchise quarterback, right? Mm-hmm. Will he reset the quarterback market? No, he will not. I think he will take a team, favorable deal, because I think he is also very aware too that, he needs core pieces around him to be successful. And this is where I make that comparison. Like Brock, hey, top 10 quarterback, no doubt. But the 5-1, they're a whole nother cloud above everybody else. And he's not in that cloud. He never will be. And that's okay. Because we've seen guys win Super Bowls and do great things. And they're not even considered in the top 10 or the top 15 in some cases. Right. So that doesn't really matter. I think the big picture is finding that space where you're saying, hey, we're taking care of our guy, we're taking care of our team, and we're going to help build around you more again with just adding depth to some of these important pieces. Because I think that's the biggest concern. Like the Debo Samuel thing, I think Debo Samuel's peak is behind him. Yep. I do, unfortunately.
I agree.
To me, he doesn't have the same step or suddenness. His physicality is definitely not as aggressive as it once was. He looks like he's a step slow, right? And big picture wise, I would say the same thing for George as well, right? He doesn't look like he is quite as sudden anymore in some of his route running and some of his breaks and things of that nature. And now Brandon coming off of the injury, right? Ricky has done some good things where you can be excited for him. Juwan Jennings has done a good job of being just a good workhorse and does all the other things that you need a solid receiver to do. So really kind of the question is just like, who is receiver one, right? Until Brandon Ayuk is healthy and 100% again, right? And we hope to see him healthy and 100% again. So a lot of question marks for the 49ers team. I really think in a lot of ways, it's really going to be you're not going to do a total rebuild, but the team, the fans, right, that you have gotten to know over the past few years, I think a lot of that is going to change and look very different over the next 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
And to the point where, that generation is now done. And now it's on to, this new frontier with this new group. And the good thing is you have a proven quarterback that knows how to play the game, knows the system extremely well. And, hopefully, right, big picture wise, I would say more so just like, can we solidify and finally be happy about whatever it is we're doing defensively, especially in the coaching staff room? Like, can we solve that problem? Right.
That's a whole other issue. It's a whole other podcast.
Because now it's kind of like one of those things where it's just like, well, you're not this guy. You're not this guy. It's like, all right, well, you gotta find some sort of, right, what are we going to do? Right. We got to buy into somebody. Right. And really support them, and then support them too with the Johnnies and Joes to get their job done well. Right. Because you could easily make the case, well, like, were they good defensive coordinators, or did they have one of the most talented defenses in the NFL? Right.
Yeah. And then there's probably a combination.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. And goes to the whole point of the conversation of quarterback too. Right. Is Brock Purdy a great quarterback, or is he a great supporting cast? Well, the funny thing is that you really can't have one without the other.
Correct.
So, Sam Darnold's a great example of this. He played for the Jets. Okay. Geno Smith, another guy, played for the Jets. All right, now look at them, right? They got some weapons around him. The franchises believe in him. And, like in Sam Darnold's case, he has one of the best offensive minds helping him tear up defenses, right?
Yep.
And that's why he has 2 fourth-quarter comeback wins in 2 weeks in a row, because he has talent around him. He has coaches that believe in him, and he's doing really well. So for the 49ers, a tough season, no doubt. You got the Bears this weekend. Listen, it's not going to get any easier. The Bears are a good defense. Caleb Williams is playing good football recently. Now, the Bears seem to find ways to mess it up in the fourth quarter of it.
But so do the 49ers.
But so do the 49ers. So somebody's got it. Well, technically not, but we hope someone has to win this game. Yeah.
Well, my last guest, Carmen, who covers the NFC North for Carmen Vitali for Fox,
right.
I said, she talked a little bit about the interim coach bump and how it's like not quantifiable, but teams tend to they get an interim coach and they come out strong. And I said to her, the 49ers are going to lose to the Bears and people are going to lose their minds. But it's not they're not where they thought they'd be. And this game is not what you thought it would be when the season started, which is what happens in the NFL. But this is not a slam dunk. This is, first of all, for the 49ers, no game is a slam dunk right now, but this is not a slam dunk. And then 4 days later, they have the Rams come to town, and it's like, I see people being like, they'll beat the Bears, they'll beat the Rams, they'll go to Miami, beat the Dolphins, they'll beat the Lions. Good luck with that. They'll beat the Lions and they're going to go to Arizona to win it out for the season. And I'm like, what team have you been watching? I understand you're a fan and you want it, but no, they're not. And that's okay. It's time to accept that. That's not going to happen. Do I think they're going to lose their last 5 games? No. But do I think they're going to lose 2 or 3 of their last 5 games? Yes, I do. I hate to say that, but
and it's okay.
See.
I mean, big picture, the problem is, all right, Chicago, good defense, right? They do solid things. You got a rookie quarterback. All right, that's your advantage, right? But other than that, though, Caleb Williams is playing extremely well recently. He hasn't turned the football over nearly as much, right? And yeah, you're right. The interim head coach thing, I think, is a real thing. That's why you had Jeff Saturday go from an ESPN broadcaster to winning a football game later that week, because there's just something about if the team kind of believes that it's fresh, then it is. And it's really interesting. The Rams, tough football team, playing really well. Defense is getting better. Secondary stinks, right? But Stafford is awesome. Puka Nacua, Cooper, and then, of course, Sean McVay just dialing up the way they need to. That's another tough football game.
And they've beaten them once.
You're right. The Miami Dolphins at Miami, whole different animal. Across the country, we've seen that just the travel has been a tough thing for the 49ers, I feel like, too. Even against the Bills, like suffering cramps, in 30-degree weather for certain players. It's like that's not a great sign, right? That's a sign of fatigue. And then the Lions, of course, we know that's a whole, another thing. And we'll see how that plays out. I guess 49ers fans, you're hoping that all right, they're already locked in and they don't even need to play.
This is a possibility.
But probably not, right? And then
no, because that 1 seed I think is going to go down to the wire.
Down to the wire is right. So that's where I feel like that's you would hope, but it's not going to. And then for the Cardinals, hey, they run the football really well. They're a physical team. James Conner, is a tough dude. Kyler McCoy. Kyler Murray is playing solid football. And, for whatever reason, the Cardinals match up extremely well with the 49ers because of their ability to control the line of scrimmage. And with the injuries that the 49ers have, that is another tough matchup too. So you're right. If you go through game by game, yes, is there an opportunity to win? No doubt. But you can absolutely make the case that that's an opportunity for them to go over as well in these last few games.
And then they get a really high draft pick. And the thing with the Cardinals game,
that's right.
And I'll let you go, is right now the Seahawks kind of have this 2-game lead in the division, but with 5 weeks to go, the Cardinals could be playing for the division in that game. So
that's right.
And they've already beaten the 49ers. So that's the thing. But listen, you do end up with like a really high draft pick, and they could use right now. I think they have, if the season ends today, I think they have the 14th pick in the draft. And they can get a really good player that they need at 14. But they may end up with a higher pick. And in 2018, Jimmy Garoppolo goes down in week 3, and John Lynch has said, it was really upsetting and we lost Jimmy Garoppolo, but because we ended up with Nick Bosa. So you'll see what happens.
And that'll be, I guess, the big question for, all of us too, is just kind of like, what direction will they go in, for that draft pick? And it's really interesting. You kind of think maybe defense, you maybe offensive line. I don't know, but you're right. It's going to be a really interesting pick for this football team because they need depth really pretty much at every position at the moment.
They really do. There's also a really good tight end coming into the draft that they could get, but we can talk about that later as we go on.
Is he from Michigan?
He might be. He's the best. Yeah. His name's Colston Loveland. I love him so much.
Anyway, I think the kid from Penn State's a better tight end, but that's okay. Nah.
What a horrible thing to say on my podcast.
That's terrible, right? I know. I'm sorry, fans. This will probably be the last time you ever see him in this show. Yeah.
Yeah. Say goodbye to Matt Sims.
Yeah.
Though.
They'll be happy about it. It's all right.
No, they won't be. Though I will have to now bring up that Michigan beat Ohio State last weekend.
Yes. I know. I was going to open the show with that, just so we could get that out there for you. And it is great. I can't lie. It was pretty amazing. I really enjoyed it a lot. And I think the highlight moment, well, of course, the fight was unfortunate. But the highlight moment for me is Sharon Moore shooting the bow and arrow across the field at Ryan Day. I mean, I was like, this is so beautiful. Like, if I was Michigan, I would blow that picture up and like I'd put it on the elevators in the facility, or like, when you walk in, like just, that look. I thought that was so funny.
It was pretty amazing. And Ryan Day just standing there watching the fight and the whole thing, doing nothing and saying, what happened? Like that.
All right. Now, hey, the cameras caught him. We don't know where Sharon Moore was during the fight. Okay.
He was trying to get his players away. The cameras, it's on camera. He was trying to get his players. Okay. He was trying to move his players out of the way.
Yep. But yeah, you're right. Not a great look for Ryan Day. Yeah.
No, that being, as much as I'm not a Ryan Day fan, I hope he stays at Ohio State till the end of time. I love Ryan Day
that's
on November Saturday.
You Michigan fans and Ohio State fans, you're interesting people. I'll just leave it at that. Yeah,
we don't like each other. But with that, I will let you go, Matt. Please let everyone know where they can find you.
Yeah, Sims Complete, Instagram, Twitter. We're also part of the Believe Network as well. Me and Big Phil talking football. And yeah, just breaking down the QB stuff and everything that's going on. So Sims Complete, find us on Instagram, Twitter, all that stuff under Sims Complete. Thank you so much, Tracy.
Absolutely. You guys, I'm on Twitter at Tracy FGSN. I'm on Blue Sky now at Tracy Sandler, Instagram at Tracy Sandler, TikTok at Tracy Sandler. You will see a theme everywhere but Twitter. If you like what you heard, and I know you did, please give us a 5-star rating and leave a positive review. We are brought to you by Bet Online. We are brought to you by Fivo. And with that, I'll talk to everybody next time. Bye, all.
See ya. Happy holidays.